Good afternoon, everyone, or if you're watching this pre-recorded, good evening or good morning. Apologies for this week's tech issues. Zoom was down, so unfortunately, we are recording this. It will be posted as soon as possible, hopefully this evening. I also want to add that Chef Loretta is on standby to answer your questions. If you are coming to us through the website, there is an email address there for Dr. Rose Strimlau. Please go ahead and send your questions to that email address, and then we will have a delayed Q&A with Chef Loretta through those questions. So if you're watching, please go ahead and send in your questions, and we will get to those with just a slight delay for you all. So again, good afternoon, Osio and Agadawu. Welcome to the 6th episode in our Resilience Recipes Native Foodpreneurs Cooking Demonstration Series. As a reminder, next week will be the finale of our series with Sean Sherman, aka the Sous Chef. So please join us to help us wrap up the series. Galiele Gajijadoa, Dr. Courtney Lewis, Dogwadoa, Jijalagi. I'm Dr. Courtney Lewis. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. I'm the current Mellon Visiting Professor of Justice, Equality, and Community and Anthropology at Davidson College. I'm also an assistant professor at the Department of Anthropology and Institute for Southern Studies at the University of South Carolina. My off-screen co-organizer is Dr. Rose Strimlau, Associate Professor of History at Davidson College. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you all are staying safe and well. Today, it is our great pleasure to bring you Chef Loretta Oden from the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Chef Loretta has put together a video for us featuring her incredible dessert of sweet corn and squash pudding with fresh berries and vanilla bean dessert oil. Chef Loretta is world-renowned for her decades of experience in really all facets of Indigenous food and the Indigenous food sovereignty movement. She was raised in Oklahoma, surrounded by cooking, and often accompanied her mother, grandmothers, and aunts while they prepared traditional dishes. As an adult, she realized the potential opportunity to educate others about Native American history and culture through cuisine. Chef Loretta believes there is no better way to educate others about such a diverse peoples. Food evolves around tradition, and cuisine reflects the rich history that Native Nations cultures possess. Chef Loretta's cooking reflects her identity, as well as the identity of many other Native nations. And she has spent the past 30 plus years cooking, studying, teaching, and adapting recipes to preserve the culinary legacy of her upbringing. In the early 1990s, she and her son, the late Chef Clayton Oden, opened the Corn Dance Cafe in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which was the first restaurant to showcase the bounty of foods indigenous to the Americas. Her prestigious experiences and accomplishments include many television appearances, such as Good Morning America, The Today Show, the Food Network, and as well as consultations from individual Native nations to working with Francis Ford Coppola. Her accomplishments are far too numerous for us to list here, but please check out our website for a more comprehensive biography of Chef Loretta. For our audience, again, since this is going to be recorded, please do send your questions to the email address listed on our website, and we will be answering those on the website. So even if you're watching pre-recorded, please feel free to email us questions. If you're comfortable, let us know who you are, where you're coming from. We'd love to know who is participating. Welcome, Chef Loretta. Thank you for staying with us through all the trials and tribulations of Zoom Live.
Bonjour. Thank you for having me. This technical age, I think, is, kind of changing our lives considerably.
It is. It really is, especially right now when we're kind of forced to jump into the deep end, right?
Right. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the dish that you're preparing in this video? Maybe what makes it specifically indigenous or citizen Potawatomi Nation?
Well, indigenous because of corn, of course, you know, having had the Corn Dance Cafe for so many years in Santa Fe, um, I became so fascinated with corn and the history of corn and what a role it has played in our culinary world throughout the Americas. So it actually started at a food summit, and we had who was it? I guess Chef Arlie Dockstader made an abundance of corn mush in this beautiful pot that he has. And I can't stand to see anything go to waste. So I'm back in the kitchen, and we had all of this roasted butternut squash, and we had this corn mush that Chef Arlie had prepared. And we just created a dessert dish out of it by adding some maple syrup and some honey and some spices. And it was such a hit that it's made it onto the permanent menu. It's on the itinerary.
Wow, that's amazing. You just came up with that on the fly.
Right.
Well, with that, I want to launch into the video. And then we will come back, and we do have some questions that came to us a little bit beforehand, before the recording. So what we'll do is come back. I know Chef Loretta has a couple of stories that didn't make it into the video, so we will be visiting those. And then we will be going through the pre-questions that we got for the Q&A. So with that, here is Chef Loretta showing us her recipe for sweet corn and squash pudding with fresh berries and a vanilla bean dessert oil that we're going to be sure to ask questions about when we come back.
Hey! Oh wait, hi! Howdy! Hello from Oklahoma. Keep those masks on, 6 feet of distance, wash your paws constantly. I'm Loretta Oden, Potawatomi from Shawnee, Oklahoma. We are broadcasting from Edmond, Oklahoma right now from my daughter-in-law's beautiful new kitchen. Had to beg her to let me use it and dirty it up, so here we are. Thank you very much to Davidson College for inviting me to take part in Indigenous Food Entrepreneurs. Is that what I'm trying to say? Yes, yes. We just finished a couple of weeks ago with an Indigenous Chopped online event that was really great fun. We had a lot of dishes coming in from chefs all over the country and had a great time with that. Today, I'm going to, since I spent the last 20-30 years working with native foods, we had a restaurant in Santa Fe, New Mexico called the Corn Dance Cafe. So, hey, I'm going to be cooking with corn. I'm going to do something a little bit different though. People think of corn and squash as savory dishes. I'm going to make a dessert out of them. And this is how we're going to proceed. We're cooking with corn today, the quintessential Native American food, along with beans and squash, make up the Three Sisters. Tribes all over the country have beautiful legends about the Three Sisters, and they are companion plantings, companion crops that grown together. They support each other. The beans fix the nitrogen in the soil that the corn so depletes, and the squash grows down low, holds in the moisture, smothers out the weeds. They grow together, they're harvested together, we eat them together, and they really, you could live off of it forever. It's just the perfect food. All the essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids. So corn, beans, and squash, stick with it, you can't go wrong. I need to tell you now what we're going to fix today. It's going to be a sweet corn and squash pudding. Don't turn up your nose. It's going to be absolutely delicious. I'm going to start by making a polenta. We call it corn mush, or I call it corn mush. Those Italians call it polenta. They did not have polenta. They did not have corn before that Columbus guy stumbled ashore and discovered us. We didn't really know we needed discovering, but that's where the corn came from. Central Mexico was home to teosinte, which was a wild little grass seed that eventually, through the brilliant agricultural skills and horticultural skills of the native peoples, has come to produce the ears of corn that we so enjoy today. So to this polenta issue, I don't know how many of you have made polenta. You get your water boiling hot, and then you start pouring in your cornmeal. You can use a coarse grind or a fine grind. You start pouring in your cornmeal and you stir like crazy to keep from getting lumps. Well, thank you to Angie Ferguson, Onondaga, that I worked with last October up at Ganandagan in upstate New York at the Seneca Nation. She says, start with cold water, put your corn in the cold water. The ratio is about, for kind of a medium puddingy textured polenta. See, I can't quit calling it polenta. But the ratio is about 4 cups of water to 1 cup of corn meal. This is a medium grind cornmeal. Have to throw in a shout for Shawnee's Best. I was born and raised in Shawnee, Oklahoma. This mill has been there for over 100 years. And shop local, folks. So what we're going to do is we've put the corn in the cold water. And I'm going to mix it up. And then I'm going to turn on this really, really fancy stove here. There we go. So while you still have to stir it, and stir it, and stir it, you're not going to have any lumps in it at all. And I'm going to let this slowly come to a boil, and then I'll turn it down low and stir it until it comes to the right consistency. What I've done back here with the squash, butternut, I've used butternut. You can use butternut or acorn. So what I've done, I'm using butternut squash. It's usually thought of as a winter squash, but it's available year-round. You could use an acorn squash as well. I love the golden color. You know, these things are sometimes rascals to wrestle around with. What I'm doing is I'm boiling the boiling the squash, because I wanted to keep that nice golden flavor. But the easiest way to do it is just cut these things in half, put them on a greased sheet pan, put them in the oven and bake them until they're tender, and then scoop out the meat. And that's a much easier way to do it than trying to peel it and cube it up the way I did. I'm going to keep stirring this polenta. What is it? Corn pudding. Here we go. I'll show you what it looks like in just a minute, because it's starting to get a little bit of a texture to it. You can do this with milk. We had no dairy in the Americas, so no butter, cheese, milk. Hence, a lot of our people are lactose intolerant, as well as using the corn rather than using wheat. A lot of people have gluten intolerance as well. So I've done this just with water. It tastes really good, but you can cook it with like milk, or you can use almond milk. Works well. It makes it a little bit richer, but the flavor of this is still going to come through just cooking it with water, because I'm going to let it cook long enough that the corn flavor really comes through. Have to be really careful with daughter-in-law Angie's new beauty. I wish you could see the other side of this range. It's a ruby red. It's absolutely a range you would want to hug. It's absolutely fabulous. So I'm trying to be really careful with it. So I'm going to add the squash, and remember we just sweetened this with a bit of honey. And I'm just going to put it right here in the middle. And I'm going to swirl it around a bit. Just swirl it around. Little bit of artwork here. It would be difficult to hang it on the wall, wouldn't it? All right, so there we are. To top this off, I have some wonderful fresh blackberries, yes, indigenous. Some blueberries, yes, indigenous. These are huge, gorgeous blueberries. And some strawberries. We're into summer season here now, and a lot of fresh berries and fruit. Wild. There are blackberry brambles growing all around where I live in Oklahoma, out in the country. Where I grew up, near Shawnee, Oklahoma, there was a blackberry bramble across the road from my house that must have stretched for a quarter of a mile. And it was just huge and loaded with berries. But picking them, oh my goodness, the stickers, dangerous work, but well worth it. So I'm going to add some berries to this. Just kind of add the berries, helter skelter. We sweeten those with a little bit of honey. I have some gorgeous strawberries. I'll put the strawberries on there. My funky little spoon. Actually, I'm going to use my fingers to put this on there. I have nice clean hands. As I said when I opened, wash your hands constantly. Keep those paws clean. Wear those masks. I'm seeing a lot of increase in our COVID numbers, unfortunately, you know, from Memorial Day, and people just kind of not taking it seriously enough. But here we have gorgeous, gorgeous fresh strawberries. And add a little greenery. Oh, but first, I have to tell you, my super secret recipe. I do this really, really funky dessert oil. And people go, dessert oil? And it's actually made out of olive oil. And here we have cilantro again. I'm just a cilantro freak, so how many scores do I have? No, two cilantros count as one on this one. So I've used coriander, toasted coriander, cilantro, the vanilla bean paste, and what else did I put in here? It's excellent. Let me show you what it looks like in my hand. So you have the little dots of the vanilla beans and a kind of a funky green color, and we just drizzle a little bit of this on our dessert. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely flavor. Part savory, part sweet. I love playing with those flavors. So there we have Chef Loretta's sweet corn and squash pudding with fresh fruit and cilantro, vanilla, let's call it coriander vanilla bean oil, dessert oil.
So the very first thing that we want to know about is this dessert oil, the story behind the dessert oil. What oil do you use as a base? Is there sweetener in the dessert oil? All of those questions.
I know, due to my lack of tech skills, there was so much left out of that video. I really apologize. Using the remote, I couldn't tell what was on and what was off. So a lot of it didn't get recorded. And I'm thinking, oh no, there's no seasoning mentioned or whatever, but the dessert oil.
No, yeah, even more time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love playing with sweet and savory, hence that corn pudding and the squash pudding. But the dessert oil is something I came up with, years ago. And it is literally cilantro, toasted coriander, ground coriander seeds, powdered ginger.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness. What am I missing here? And olive oil. You can use an extra virgin if you don't mind that little bite at the end, but I tend to use kind of a softer blended virgin oil. olive oil. You could use another oil, but I like the green. I like that texture. So throw all of that into a blender, whir it up, and run it through a strainer. Oh, the vanilla beans. That's the big part of it. Can I tell my vanilla bean story at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. Tell the vanilla bean story.
Vanilla beans fascinate me. Can you see this thing?
Yes. Yeah.
It's, originated in Mexico. They grow in Mexico, Guatemala. But out of the hundreds of varieties of orchid plants, there's only one that produces anything edible, and it's called, the vanilla orchid. But, and it's only open for pollination for one 24-hour period. There's only one species of bee that can pollinate it, and hence it forms these pods that then, in the old days, would fall to the forest floor or the jungle floor and ferment. Now, who's walking through, down the path, and they see this thing and they go, I think I'll eat that. All of our foods have such fascinating stories. So I did use the seeds of the vanilla bean. Next to saffron, this is the next most expensive spice out there. They now are hand pollinated. So, hence they're a lot more available, and it keeps the price semi reasonable. And most of it you see is either from Tahiti or it's Madagascar vanilla beans. But what I do is just slit them with a sharp knife. Okay. And you can just scrape the little paste with all the little tiny seeds in it. And that's what makes it such a complex, beautiful flavor. But that's, the funky little vanilla bean goo that's in there. So, and you can also buy vanilla bean paste. It's not quite as expensive, and it's a lot less work. But when I scrape out my vanilla beans, then I'll just put them in a jar with some sugar and have vanilla flavored sugar. So that the vanilla bean paste, along with the honey, the toasted coriander, the cilantro, and the ginger, went into the blender. Then I strained it. Okay. And then what is left is this oil. You saw me shaking it up in the squeeze bottle. When it goes down, it kind of spreads, and you see the little black dots of the vanilla beans and the little green flecks from the fresh cilantro. And it's just, you just have to make it and try it. It's one of the most unusual flavors. Sweet to your taste with honey, and it's just yummy. I use it a lot.
So did you try other herbs with this? Were you just kind of inspired when you first put it together? Did this take a lot of experimentation?
Not really. I'm just an absolute cilantro freak. And, while it's not indigenous, I love cilantro. The first time I tried it, I went, that tastes like soap. I just hate it. And now, people say that if you're genetically inclined, but I learned to love it, and now I'm just obsessed with it. And then when I started working with the seed of the cilantro, the coriander, totally different aroma, totally different flavor. I toast the seeds, and almost a perfumey flavor. And so I use both the cilantro and the coriander. Those are my two, when I say that probably 85 to 90% of my ingredients are indigenous to some point in the Americas. I have a few exceptions, and they're in there because I like them. and coriander and cilantro are those. So this oil keeps, I just keep it in a capped and sealed little plastic squeeze bottle, and it's absolutely on vanilla ice cream. It's just one of those funky things that I came up with. And
it's just, is it fresh cilantro, correct? Not dried cilantro?
Yes, okay. Fresh cilantro, because I like that green color to it. when you plate a dessert, you feast with your eyes before you ever take a taste of the food. So when I plate desserts, that's kind of my art form. So I love to, paint different colors on the plate with fruit purees for the desserts and little drips of this cilantro oil on the plate. And it just does this magical thing. It's really fun.
Oh, well, I'm glad it's spring because I have a lot of cilantro right now, and it needs to go into this oil. And I also have ice cream, so I am ready in every day to jump into this oil.
Oh, great. And don't think I mentioned the seasonings in the corn mush either.
Okay.
I remember what I put in it. Again, that's the toasted coriander. That's why I mentioned I had 2 cilantro strikes against me there in that one dish. I sweetened that with maple syrup.
Okay.
And it's literally, the corn, the water, maple syrup, the toasted coriander seed. And that's it. We can always post the recipes at some point, I hope.
Yeah, we can definitely post the recipe. So this is, I want to thank you for bringing the only dessert to our series. I feel like indigenous desserts don't get a lot of play. So having this featured, I think, really brings to the forefront, it helps to expand people's conceptions of what indigenous cuisine is and has been. Right?
Yes.
It's not just all bison and venison, right?
Right. Well, and dessert, since we had no sugar, we had no canned sugar or anything, we had to rely upon, the creator, Mother Nature, Mother Earth to bring us something sweet. And it was usually seasonal. So the berries and the honey, of course, the maple, of course, that's seasonal, but you're able to put that up. So we really did have desserts. We really did have sweet treats to enjoy. And I love to point that out, that as bad as sugar is for us, we certainly have alternatives to that.
Oh yeah, and much healthier alternatives, right?
Oh yeah, much healthier, much more delicious.
So as I recall, you have another story that didn't make it into the video about the cast iron pot.
Ah, yes, that old cast iron. I think they call them a Dutch oven. Don't know why, but it has an old metal hasp on it. I found that I was, foraging around in my past and found it on the houseboat at an old lake cabin we had down at Lake Eufaula. And I looked at it and I went, I remember this pot. And it had belonged to my great-grandmother. So that made it probably, 100, 150 years old. And she had to have probably gotten it from someone. So this is pre-Oklahoma statehood, back in Indian Territory. That this pot made it to my kitchen. So it said that, everyone has talking about, I love to talk about clay pots and the flavor enhancements and the spirit and all that goes in. Well, the people that make the cast iron pots say the same thing, that since you don't really ever wash them, you shouldn't. Right. You clean them really well, that they retain flavors. And I think they also retain a bit of the spirit of the person who stirred that pot. So I like to think that the pot teaches me a little bit.
That's a lot of spirit in that pot.
Yes.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
That must taste phenomenal.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it's great. It stays on my stovetop all the time.
So in some of your previous talks, you've mentioned a little bit about misconceptions about indigenous foods. And also you mentioned that when you first started, you got a lot of skepticism about your work. And you are one of the forerunners of this entire movement. I was wondering if you could talk to us about how you got past a lot of that skepticism about indigenous cuisine, and what are some of the misconceptions that you might still see hanging around today?
Well, of course, we all know the fry bread story.
Yeah.
What is Native American food? What is Indian food? Well, it's fry bread, it's Indian tacos, it's Navajo tacos.
Right.
And, that's kind of how the outside world views our food. Some of us inside as well. And so when Clay and I opened this restaurant in Santa Fe, a great food mecca, a great art mecca. The majority of that of Indian artists that I know in Oklahoma go to Santa Fe to sell their work. So it's a very it's a very artsy, very popular town, and it's also a heck of a great food town. And this was in the early '90s, but aside from people just not knowing what is Native American food, am I going to be eating grasshoppers and bugs when I go in there? Or what I got most often is it going to be that bland stuff I get when I go to visit a reservation or a powwow? They don't use any seasoning or any of that. Right. So what we did at the corn dance, I think it was kind of groundbreaking, is, I took my ingredient base from anything that was indigenous, from Nunavut to Tierra del Fuego and everything in between. And while I preach, stay regional and seasonal, there in the early '90s, it was a very competitive food town. And I really wanted to tell the story of how diverse we are as Native peoples, as indigenous peoples, through the amazing diversity of how many foods are indigenous to the Americas. Right. What is it? 60-70% of the food enjoyed around the world today came from here. Yeah. So we'd create these recipes, and even if it were maybe a classical French recipe or a home recipe, I would Indian it up a little bit, So any ingredient that wasn't indigenous, I would say, what can we use here? So it really took a lot of research. It took a lot of homework. I think I had mentioned the story of ginger. I love ginger root. And then I would have to ask myself, can I use this? Is it indigenous? And I was up at Ganandigan, up at the Seneca, with Pete. Oh my goodness, Pete and Jeanette. I'll think of it in a minute. I hate myself when I do that. They're absolutely amazing. We're walking out. He's an incredible ethnobotanist. He's the chief of the tribe, and I can't think of his last name. And we were talking about ginger. He knew every plant that was out there. And I said, well, tell me about ginger. Can I use this? And he said, oh, well, of course. And he, kind of looked around, and there, a little low-growing plant. He reached down, pulled it up, little root on it, and he said, here, taste this. Ginger, boom. Yes, I can use ginger. And of course, I can't go out and forage that much wild ginger, but it gives me leeway to use a relative, the ginger root that we can find. So, yeah, so it's fun, it's exciting, and I'm always learning. After all of these years, I'm learning. It's never ending.
Yeah, that is true, especially now with the Indigenous food sovereignty movement becoming so popular. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the changes that you've seen within the movement, within Indigenous peoples kind of driving this movement over the past few decades. And maybe if you have any insights as to where you think this is going to go in the future, we would be open to hearing those.
Yeah, absolutely. When I opened and we started researching the foods, I did a lot of travel before we opened in Santa Fe. I'd go from, reservation to reservation. I'd get referred from one woman to another, always the women. And so I really learned so much during that couple of years. And when in the early 90s, I was looking for cookbooks.
Right.
No. The only cookbook that was out there was Beverly Cox's wonderful book. And I think Dale Carson, who's Abenaki, had kind of a little homemade cookbook and a whole lot of funky little commodity cookbooks, but they were using commods, they were using I said, no, that's not what I want to do. So we really had to be very inventive and very creative with what we were doing. Mark Miller, who owned the Coyote Cafe in Santa Fe at that time, and it was really a hot spot. He's an anthropologist, and I then met Jack Weatherford, who had written a couple of books, one called Indian Givers, which, kind of a funky title, but a very, very enlightening book. I think he was a professor at Macalester College. I had the great honor of getting called into the dining room at the restaurant one night, and the whole table stood up and applauded. And it was Jack Weatherford, and his entourage, and said, "Hey, good work, Loretta." So I'm going, whoa, this is cool. But what I see happening now, it just seemed to, I was a big splash, back during the 90s, and with all of the appearances and the magazine articles and all of that. Of course, I do have to note that the TV appearances, Good Morning America and the Today Show, were on Thanksgiving morning.
Of course, we would expect that. Yeah,
exactly. It's Thanksgiving. Let's go find an Indian to cook some turkey for us. So, but it was great fun, and just overwhelming for me. So I didn't start this endeavor until, rather late in life. And it has taken me places that I would never have imagined I would be. But, the 10 years in Santa Fe, and then it seemed to kind of just go away for a while. You didn't see much or hear much about it. And this latest, uprising, if I can call it that. I have met and worked with in the last few years so many brilliant, creative, enthusiastic young chefs who want to learn, who are bringing so much to the table that, I think this time around we may get it. We may get it. Well, Ben Jacobs with Tokabe, all of these chefs. If I haven't worked with them, I at least know them and know of them. And some of them are doing things that are just amazing. And I want to see native foods. You still go into a town, wherever you travel across the U.S., you look for Native American foods. I even made them put a category in the food and restaurant section of the Santa Fe phone book, back when we had phone books, and they would have categories, Italian, French, whatever. I said, hey, wait a minute. There's one missing here. So they did put Native American foods in the yellow pages of the Santa Fe phone book. So,
and that's important. That is important.
Absolutely. So my dream is to not only help and encourage these young chefs, but to get culinary training in as a native foods category for culinary training. And then I want to be able to drive, across the country and find a native foods restaurant in every town. We need it.
I support that.
I know it works overseas because I've traveled. The Europeans, the French, the Germans are just, insane over anything Native American. I've cooked in Tokyo, and they were just like, it was amazing. There's even a Dennis Banks cafe in Tokyo.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yes, it's just like, whoa, what is this?
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, so it's, it can happen. It can happen. It needs to happen.
So we can take over. I'm hearing that.
Absolutely. I find that if you feed people well, you can kind of grab them by the belly and they'll listen to most anything you have to say. You know, they're just sitting there all, oh, I feel so good. Now, well, let me tell you a little bit about where this food came from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, the timeline of this kind of new movement that's coming up fits in with a lot of your work, because it seems like as you and other leaders in the indigenous food movement were hitting this peak in the 90s, right? This would have been the exact same time that many of these native chefs would have been young and watching you. And I can't overstate the importance of us seeing native people in front of us and on media and being interviewed, even if it's just for Thanksgiving. It's not just, because this is the kind of mentorship and inspiration that actually shows young people that they can do this, that they can be the ones starting restaurants, they can be the ones being interviewed on TV, and their food can actually reach out to a lot of people, right? So I think the work that you did is what set us up for the kind of resurgence that we're seeing right now. So from your perspective, when you're working with all of these young chefs, and I know you've worked with pretty much almost all of them across the United States at this point, what kind of advice do you give them, not just culinarily, but how to kind of manage being a chef, but also kind of always being in the spotlight too? Do you encourage them? Do you kind of give them a realistic, I mean, being a chef is a difficult choice, and running a restaurant is very challenging. So how do you talk them through these kind of issues?
Absolutely. And I've been, you know, kitchens have a reputation for being pretty tough, rough, macho places to work. There's kind of a patriarchy in the culinary world. Right. I've had some pretty amazing experiences going into some kitchens. I've always traveled alone, you know, all over the country, going to a hotel, going into some big hotel kitchen or into some place to do a wine dinner, and I'm faced with a kitchen full of guys who are saying, what's that little old lady doing in my kitchen? You know, what the hell can she do? And what you do is you just smile, you enlist, you stand there in the corner and you just lay your knives out, you put your mise en place there and you start working. And you know, eventually somebody's going to come over and ask you a question. They're going to say, you know, well, what kind of bean is that? You know, what kind of, you know, a choya bud, what is that? And so I've always been able to enlist assistance, you know, when I really needed it. But I think the most important thing is that old culture in the kitchen really needs to smooth out. Food needs to be cooked with love and spirit. You feed your love and spirit for the food into how it tastes. Like when we would have kind of glitchy, crazy times at the restaurant, at the corn dance, it affected the food. It's you can taste it. And so with a lot of the young chefs, you have to not let chefdom go to your head. You know, it's kind of the big knife bags, the tackle boxes full of knives and all of that. My son did that, you know, because they become knife freaks, and it's really fun. I'm a bit of a knife freak, but when I travel, I carry like 3 knives with me, and so it's fun. They just need to learn. They need to listen. They need to listen and talk with the elders, because we're the ones who have memories. You know, I go back. I'll be 78 in August. So I go back a few years, and I remember when we had, you know, gardens and big fields of different vegetables, and not just cornfields and wheat fields. So, and I remember what the food tasted like, you know, fresh out of the garden. So those are the things that, you know, all of these chefs need, and I'm seeing more young women. I've worked with a lot of young women. Just stay true to stay true to your culture and stay true to what the creator put there for us. Treat it with respect and prepare it gently. And you just can't lose. You can't lose.
Well, it sounds like they're all following your advice. So good work there. That's tough to get the youth to follow your advice.
Yeah. Right.
So we have a couple of questions coming in from the outside. Some of the folks who had sent in questions before. We have one question about your PBS series, if you'd like to talk about that a little bit, and we'll be posting the promo video for that up. And the second question is a question about any books you might be working on.
Well, the PBS series was really quite a thrill. I was working with what used to be known as Native American Public Telecommunications, Frank Blythe. It took us 10 years to get the funding and get this thing on the road. And we had, it's now Vision Maker Video. They're based in Lincoln, Nebraska. But we had raised X number of dollars for this show, and we were going to PBS conferences and APB conferences, and I'm thinking, wow, where's this money going and all that. And then I finally said, you know what, tell me how much money we have left. I'm going to hit the road. And we did this series even before Anthony Bourdain hit the road. This was we started shooting in 2005. I think we started in New Orleans just before Katrina hit. And I had a camera guy and a sound guy. They were awesome. I wrote all the episodes, had some really great help from Lily Shangro. And we had, someone who could be a PA for us. I knew people through my previous travels in these locations. So we shot at the Homination and outside of New Orleans. So we got to be in New Orleans, and that was great fun. And we did wild rice, we did buffalo, we did the salmon on the Klamath River with the Yurok. Beautiful, beautiful show. So we were only able to get 5 episodes out of the monies that we had. So those 5 episodes aired in late 2006, 2007, and we won an Emmy. And I'm going, whoa, this is pretty amazing. So, in all of the intervening years, I've been hoping to, get enough funding to do the other, 21 episodes that I have written, because I wanted to go all over, North America and then down into Mexico and South America, because there's just so much to be seen and filmed. But those, I think if you do it was called Seasoned with Spirit, A Native Cook's Journey. I do have, if anyone still has DVD players, I have quite a number of DVDs that on hand that I can sell. I know that it's gone digital, so I don't know where. Probably at visionmaker.org it might be downloadable digitally. So, feel free to email me with questions about, I can sell them 1 episode at a time or the set of all 5 at a real bargain price.
If we post a link to your website, can people click through and contact you there?
Email's better. I don't have a website up right now.
Okay.
Due to my, my lack of technical skills going on. That will happen soon. Okay. But about the book, I should have written a cookbook 25 years ago, and people keep asking, now that I don't have a restaurant, where do we find your food? How do we learn to prepare your food? So I am working on a cookbook now. It'll be through OU Press, and I'm really excited about that. We're just, in the early table of contents, proposal stage, but hopefully, once I get through the insanity of the last couple of months, I can settle down and write that cookbook. It's going to be a combination memoirs and cookbook, because I have to tell my tales along the way.
That's what we want, though. We want all of it. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Let's see. Just a couple of more questions. So, given the time that we're in with COVID, what kind of challenges do you see happening for Indigenous foods right now during this pandemic? Are there issues with getting food to people, accessing food, food safety?
Absolutely, access is a terrible problem. We have on the reservations, and even in urban areas like where I live. I live in the middle of Oklahoma City, but I live in a food desert. There's nowhere that I can go to get food within several miles, so I can't walk to the grocery store. Our farmers markets are kind of few and far between. So access is really big. One of the biggest things that I preach, and I sit here looking out the window, I have two big families of Mexican people from Acapulco that live across the street from me. And I live in a funky little arts area, and they used to put these big gardens in their front yard. And the HOA, the Homeowners Association, called them out for it. And I'm going, come on. I went to city council and everything. I said, try eating that Bermuda grass on your lawn out there and see how good that is.
And so now people are coming back to gardening with COVID.
Absolutely. And that's what I am, I've always preached, go out and get your hands and your feet in the dirt, feel the warmth of Mother Earth and how it feels and smells. And I'm looking out now at their gardens, and it just makes me beam. It's like I don't have enough space for a garden, but put a tomato plant in a flower pot, for heaven's sakes. Anything that you grow is going to give you such a sense of accomplishment, and it will give you such a taste, such a burst that, wow, this came from a seed, from, what a miraculous thing that is.
Yeah. And it's especially good, I think, for people when they've never grown anything. To start with herbs. They tend to be fairly forgiving. They're expensive in the stores. And if you're growing things like mint, it's hard to kill even if you want to. So.
Yeah. And you can grow herbs on your windowsill, on your porch, on the fire escape if you're in the city. So it's easy to do. And it really is quite fulfilling. It's, it just kind of warms the cockles of your heart, whatever in the heck that means.
It does. I don't even know what those are, but it does.
Yeah. Cockles. I thought they were a seafood, and I don't know what they're doing in my heart, but.
Oh, man. So one of the last questions, I don't want to take up too much of your time, because the more time I take of yours, the less time you're working on the cookbook. So I won't take up too much time. But I see that there's some work being done with the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma. Is that still ongoing? Are you working with them?
Yes, I am. It is. We are funded. It is go.
Fantastic.
It was called the American Indian Museum. Anyway, we changed the name to First American Museum, which is so fitting, and it's so easy. It's just FAM.org. We're scheduled to open in May of 2021. So construction is full bore. It's going. I am working with them on the restaurant design, the menus, and sourcing the foods. We still don't have our operator yet, but we put the RFPs out. We've narrowed it down to 2 operators, and so whomever it is, I'm just going to jump all over them with, here's what we're going to cook. I really want it to be a destination restaurant. That's what we have in mind, and not your. I don't want to demean anyone's food, but not your usual museum fare.
Right.
We really would, we're going to have a grab and go, really fun food, and then we're going to have a pretty upscale seated restaurant. And the structure is gorgeous. We have a lot of exhibits on loan that'll be coming in from the Smithsonian, and it's an unbelievable children's interactive area. So famok.org is coming to town.
All right. And we will also put famok.org on our website. So we will put that under our resources for everybody to be able to access. And hopefully next year we will all be able to get together.
Absolutely. Because you look at this opportunity for us to highlight the 39 federally recognized tribes that are reservation in Oklahoma. Yeah. So that's 39 tribes that came from all points in North America. And think of the diversity of, the foods. And I just get crazy. It's going to be great fun.
I'm hungry just thinking about it. So.
Me too.
I'm ready.
Buffalo burgers will be, number one on the menu.
Well, we are wrapping up with our time right now. Any last bit of advice you'd like to leave, either for young people looking to get into the industry, what should they do to kind of prepare for that, or just in general for our audience in supporting Indigenous cuisine, Indigenous chefs, Indigenous small businesses?
Be inquisitive, be resourceful. There's a lot of funding out there. Everyone gets so afraid of not being able to fund. Do your homework, write your business plans. First, be very cautious with that. And then as far as the food, it's the only food genre that has not been presented or highlighted in this country. We can get Thai, we can get Mongolian barbecue, French, but no native foods. So that's my goal, is to serve really authentic, delicious food that tell our story. And if everyone keeps that in mind, and as that is their goal, I think we can really open some eyes and some mouths and feed them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for telling our story through food. And thank you again for being with us, even through all the technical difficulties. Just going to come with our day and age, especially right now.
Exactly.
But we really appreciate you being with us here today, and all the work you do on behalf of the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Movement, and getting this food not just to a broader audience, but also to our communities, right?
Yes, we need it. We need the healthy aspect of it all desperately.
We do. We really do. So thank you again, Chef Loretta. And I hope to see you in person maybe next year at the museum.
Yes, absolutely. You're on the list.
Yes. Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Miigwech.